This is Pull Request, live from the heart of Brooklyn. Pull Request is an hour-long podcast about everything in and relating to technology. Starring four techno experts. Eric Newman, hi. Chris Grabowski,
hi.
Tyler Dinner,
Hey there.
and special guest, Ryan Cwynar.
What's up?
This week's episode, Start Me Up. And that's not a euphemism. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Pull Request. My name is Eric Newman, and to my left is the wonderful, the talented, the beautiful, the insufferable Chris Grabowski. Hello. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Just doing it right, okay? And to your left is Tyler Dinner. Hello, Tyler.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Fantastic. And I'd like you two to welcome our special guest for today, Mr. Ryan Cwynar. Hey, Ryan.
Welcome.
Hey.
Ryan.
Hey.
Thanks.
Well, welcome to this podcast. Welcome to our little corner of the internet.
I feel very
How's,
welcomed.
Thanks. And you're coming to us from Denver today. Is that
Boulder,
right?
Boulder.
Boulder.
Yep.
Okay. And how is and how is that? You're usually based in Los Angeles. Can we say that?
Yeah. I'm usually in Los Angeles. I'm finding that Boulder is getting way too liberal right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in a pizza store, and there was the logo. They served all the slices on little crucifixes, and they had all these shirts with their arms really spread out that said, "Our slices are this big."
You know, one of the sound effects I don't have are studio audience laughter. I really should have worked on that this week. So. Sorry, what was that, Tyler?
Like a drum kit, but a chain thing.
Huh?
You know the drum kit, like sign off.
You mean a rim shot?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The water fountains
Trying to
dispensed
steal a rip
wine. It's pretty good.
exactly. Well, it's certainly nice to have you here, and we wanted you on because you're part of a startup accelerator that's going on right now in Boulder.
That's correct.
And how long is it?
It's about 3 months. So it started in late Feb. We got through March. And demo day is on May 20th.
Okay. And can you walk us through kind of what a startup accelerator is?
Sure.
For those playing the home game.
Yes, I mean, there's different ones out there. This one's a little more intimate than the average one. I think like the one everyone knows is Y Combinator. And that's basically where you get 100 startups, put them in a room, and then they say, "We're going to do nothing to help you. Here's some money, and here's a list of people you can talk to now that you're a YC startup." But this one's a little more intimate. So we got about how many companies are there here? There's about 6 or 7 that are part of this. They call it a cohort. Generally, like 2 people on each team. Our team is the weird one. We've got like 4 people. But yeah, you get in here and they just have like a sort of an endless stream of mentor people they've gathered contacts with on the Boulder scene, and they come in and talk about different aspects of branding, finance, storytelling, advertising, and you just get like endless feedback from pretty sharp people about the direction your company's probably going in, direction you probably should be going in, whether your name should change, and
are there offers made right there at the end of the accelerator?
Yeah, potentially. You kind of get a sense of if you're going to get invested in on the way to that as well. And then in a number of cases, there's companies where funding doesn't even really make sense. But
so
ours,
you go through the whole process and you realize this is not really a service that people are going to want.
No. It's just like it comes down to the business model. So, you know, after you go through enough analysis, some business models, it wouldn't really be there wouldn't be a great deal of advantage in putting funding behind it. It would probably just be like unnecessary stress on the model. You know, you're probably better off just go out and start gathering revenue if your business model lends itself to it. Really, like, funding is.
And when you say gathering revenue, you mean just doing it.
just executing on
without
on
losing,
whatever your model is.
Because, a lot of people, I think, seem to look at these offers, especially with, these big number. They see, we live in a startup culture. They see these big number investments, and they see these companies where the founders walk away billionaires, and they want a piece of that. But every time you do add a new investor, it, of course, chips away at some of the equity. And you don't want to dilute yourself too much, or else you won't have a company. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some interesting, like, little rules of thumb that I've gotten exposed to over the last couple months or so. Like we were over at Batshit Crazy Ventures, which is headed up by Alex Grabowski, and he's the guy responsible for the rebranding of Domino's. You know how Domino's doesn't suck anymore? That's that guy's work.
Extra garlic and butter on their pizza now?
No, the pizza is still the same. Their branding is better.
Oh, yeah, they garlic that shit up now. It's so good.
What do you do, Tyler? What are you doing in Brooklyn getting Domino's?
I don't get it. I just know from people that do, and then I eat a slice, and then I eat 5 slices because I can't stop because of the garlic.
Okay.
Huh. Yeah, it can happen. Easily.
I guess one thing that I kind of want to ask, because I guess it's not too clear to me, Ryan.
Yeah.
Are you in a company that is going through this, or are you actually working for the accelerator itself?
Oh no, I'm in a company that's going through this accelerator.
Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so we were in this meeting with, like, Alex Grabowski and this guy Dane, and they're just, like, spitballing against our idea. There are a couple of our mentors in the project, and one of the things that came up is that if you have a B2B play within your business model, it's typically the easier route to go down because it almost always requires less funding. Because the revenue lines, like, really, like, where people need shit tons of funding is when you're trying to go for, like, a B2C play. Because customer acquisition is just so much harder when you're trying to get to consumers, like end consumers, because they don't typically feel like they should have to pay anything for anything. Whereas
they're more disparate, and they're harder to, they're more spread out geographically. They're more spread out in terms of tastes, and
and they don't communicate with each other about.
And you need to have much more of a refined message than I guess you would if you were just B2B, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. But and also, I think it's just the core of it is just that business people are used to paying money to make money. Like, they're used to getting together a set of tools in order to make a service that they can draw a margin on.
And do you think anything with the modern internet economy and us all growing up, the generation of software pirating and music pirating and stuff, that it's kind of, we've been sapped of this idea that things should cost stuff?
No, I mean, I think for some things, yeah. I think for some things we clearly have come to the conclusion that we shouldn't have to pay for certain things. But I think it's still the case that important information still costs money. Information is still it's still not cheap to get access to important information.
And what do you mean information?
I mean, for instance, like our startup, we essentially give people access to the price history of things on Amazon, and we have to pay for access to that third party that feeds us that stuff. And, like, you don't stumble upon that data randomly because people know that it took some resources to aggregate it and organize it, and they have no reason to just, like, put it out there for free. So there's certain things that still cost money to get access to. If you in the financial world, it's just, like, rife with tools where people are paying a premium to get access to information faster.
Gotcha. And this is the information economy, so it would make sense that you monetize the information.
Yeah. And that's even, like, whole businesses are built around, like big data plays have been a buzzword for, like, a year or two now.
Yes.
That does remind me, and speaking of more of the B2B side, I'd kind of bring up that there does seem to be, statistically speaking, more money in B2B. Like, you look at Cloudera, which are kind of like a Hadoop and management, big data stuff as a service company, or just a platform, rather. They're about to IPO, and they're actually expecting a pretty positive IPO. Well, I should say they announced an IPO, that they will IPO this past week.
Is that like when you have to go to the bathroom really badly and you're holding it in?
Man.
I think we all know what an IPO is.
An
So that's a
IPO or
yes?
Hadoop? Hadoop sounds like it could be a bowel movement of some kind.
It's actually named after a stuffed elephant, so it's kind of weird. But
Sounds like the Street Fighter
Is
thing
it?
to me every time.
yeah,
Where?
the guy who built it, his daughter had a stuffed elephant named Hadoop.
What kind of weird name is this? Like this child's imaginary friend name that she put on this elephant, and that became the name of this.
I mean, you ever have a stuffed animal as a kid?
I mean, it's right up there with Babar.
It's like an Indian name, I think.
I didn't have any toys as a child.
What about Babar the elephant? Or Babar, sorry.
Babar sounds like an Arab elephant.
Okay, well, Hadoop might be... I don't know.
Like,
Anyway.
it would be an Indian elephant.
An Indian,
They
yeah,
got
there you
lots
go, an
of
Indian elephant. That's cool. Christian and Tyler, Ryan and I actually have a little bit of history together. We went to high school together back in South Florida. And you actually, Ryan, are the reason that I got into professional web design. And I don't know if I actually ever told you that.
I mean, I think I probably guesstimated. I mean, because I started making websites when I was 13 or 14 years old. I don't know why. I do remember why. I had a 6th or 7th grade class that involved. It was like Congress Middle School. For whatever reason, they had like a web design class. This is back in 2001. 2000 yeah, it was like really like quite a ways back. And then I think my folks got me like a Macromedia. Back when it was Macromedia, they got me like the suite of like Dreamweaver and Fireworks and whatever. Back when there were just like Apache servers and CSS. CSS wasn't even a thing yet. Was it? I don't think it was.
I mean, it really...
What year was
it
this?
Depends.
2000.
1999.
Oh, yeah,
it did exist,
yeah,
but...
CSS was a thing for
It was
a
not,
good few
but
years by then.
the
Was it?
idea of what we use CSS for now, though, is not... A lot. I mean, you still... That era of web design was still very much full of font tags.
You weren't doing like keyframe animations with CSS back then.
No, but you weren't
just color
you
buttons.
also weren't doing like display tables or things that are vertically centered or even horizontally centered.
Yeah,
blocks.
I remember building
No,
layouts and
you're
tables.
just messing with like margin and color.
Yeah.
And many
A
more
border,
HTML
lots of
attributes.
Borders.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I had I think I introduced us to our first odd client, Giovanni Molina. He's still, you can follow him on Instagram. He's a very strange creature.
Shh. I don't know if we should speak his name.
I don't know. Yeah, he's an odd dude. Like he's cringeworthy. It just makes you yeah. Especially the older I've gotten, the weirder he gets in my mind.
And okay, he's the type of person that he says that we should drink at least 10 cups of coffee a day, and then.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, but then you should see just the type of frenetic energy he has. I swear to God, he writes and talks like Donald. Like the way that his writing style is, it's almost identical to Donald.
I think
great.
his self-concept must be similar.
Yeah. What is it? Yeah, so you introduced me to what was my first client. I guess it was your first client too, in like 2004. And what happened was, I'd also got into web design around the same time. My first website was for my 7th grade science class in '99 on AngelFire, and I was like kind of toying around with web design, and I got into PHP in 2002. I was making a website. I was doing like just putzing around making websites, not really for anybody. But I saw that you were actually doing it and making money from it, and then you were also getting a bunch of attention and people saying, "Oh man, that's really cool." I said, "Well, if Ryan could do that, I could probably do that."
Yeah,
and then I did, and then we started working together. And then you left to go.
I went and joined the military.
Force.
That was a horrible idea.
Well, no, because you don't have any student debt.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
And you got a full ride scholarship to a probably really good education. You just had to do some things that you might not be too proud of, maybe?
Yeah, I think I just didn't sign up for the right major. I have no idea why I signed up to be a physics major. I should have just kept going with the computer science thing. It would have been way easier. I have no idea.
Interesting. But you did end up with a job doing nothing, getting paid a decent salary as a, quote, physicist for the government.
I did.
Afterwards.
I did end up getting a nice job doing practically nothing for like 5 years. So I got paid to live in Boston and Los Angeles for like 5 years, and then deployed to Honduras for half a year. Yeah, it wasn't bad. I can't complain.
Do military IDs ever expire?
They
Can you get
do.
those benefits?
They do. I tried to use it at the Grand Canyon about a month and a half
What do you need to use it
ago.
at the Grand Canyon for?
You can because you have to pay to get into the Grand Canyon now.
What? It's a crack. It's a crack in the earth.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you were willing to, like, I don't know, really hike it out around, if you just parked short of that gate and just like walked through there.
I've never been actually, so I have no idea.
Okay, so I hear this is a new.
It's fenced off. Is that what it is?
I don't think it's fenced off. I think they're just relying on vast expanses of land to, like, if you want to take a nice road to get right up to the south side of the canyon, then you're gonna have to pay to use that nice road. But if you have a military ID, I think it's free. I had a military ID, but I pulled it out, and the guy looked at it with that ID is expired, and I'm like, yes, it is. It's definitely expired.
Should be like, the wars haven't ended yet.
Right?
Yeah.
I could do that.
My love for this country doesn't expire.
Patriotism doesn't expire.
Exactly.
My PTSD
Freedom.
didn't expire.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
I'm on a waiting list at the VA right now. It's so long that I don't even have to be there.
I think I was high as well at the time, so that was interesting.
Interesting. And what is it? So while you went to the Air Force Academy, you left me with Giovanni, and this is a guy that made a bunch of money off of the housing bubble crisis 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and then rolled those winnings into an independent film company in Boca called Real Films.
He's still doing it, isn't he?
He's still doing it. They finally, I think it took them 10 years to film their big movie, Scapegoat, and it looks like the car chase scene. The movie looks like the most cliche action movie ever.
Can you actually watch it? Where is it?
He has a trailer. He has a trailer for it. I only know that because one day This is a guy who, I mean, talk about equity. I wish there was some sort of like percentage something I could get rather than the $200 he would pay me to. He'd call me up one day, be like, Eric, you know how DreamWorks has a website? Yeah, okay, I want DreamWorks' website. Can you do that in a month for $250? No.
I don't know that I would make one page for $250 anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the whole, everything has changed from back then. I mean, you wouldn't do anything the same way. And the value propositions have completely changed. It's a new era.
Yeah.
It really is. And you took a 10-year break and then decided to climb the mountain of modern software development, and I think that you've done it.
Yeah, I'm back into it now.
Now you're back into it, and you're at the startup accelerator, pitching your thing. And
I mean, I did what I do best. I found someone who was also like really good at it, who I could become good friends with, and so I like piggybacked onto that experience. So without having like my own network of like contacts and clients and whatever, I sort of have been able to get back into it, get some client work, and get my bearings about me.
That's good. And then you're also now in the React lifestyle, like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a front end guy?
Yourself.
No.
Yeah.
Like
my condolences to you front end guys.
I spend most of my time with like Node stuff. I don't like to bring in a framework until I really have to.
All right. I should just say my condolences to anyone who's dealing with JavaScript. Whoa.
I mean, JavaScript is getting nice.
Yeah, it's gotten better, but I don't know. I'd take the languages I write every day over those, which I used to write every day.
I don't have to write JavaScript anymore, but I pity those that still do.
Well, I guess I'm just building things that rely entirely on math and science instead of business logic. I kind of like that. It just kind of works better. It's a lot more straightforward, and I get to solve a lot cooler problems.
Web browsers render Go client side, you can get back to me.
They do. Well, it's a transpiler, but you have to do a transpiler for ES6 anyway, so...
What's transpiling do?
Transpiler basically just says... so think of it as if you were to treat ES5 as assembly language, And then you have this transpiler to function like a compiler to say, take this higher level language and convert it into the thing that the browser will actually run.
So wait, you're taking Go and turning it into JavaScript?
Basically.
Yeah, there's this thing Go for JS. I've never actually used it. It looks a little...
I'm sure that's a winner.
Harebrained for me. It is weirdly popular, but it's not, I mean, it's not used in too many like actual production, like gets a lot of traffic sites, but like you still have to transpile even ES6 stuff if you're using like a Webpack or Babel or any of that stuff. You're still transpiling anyway.
I'm still stuck on this piled.
But you don't really have to transpile stuff anymore, since most modern web browsers just natively support ES6.
If you want to use generators, you do.
I didn't actually know that you can just write an ES6 and the browser will get it.
It's like maybe like I'd say 60% of ES6 features are supported in Chrome, and a different 60% are supported in Firefox.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just still babbling everything and making sure it's getting down to vanilla JS.
Okay.
It's got to happen.
Yeah, it works out pretty good. Yeah,
I don't mind it. It's fine.
It's just the setup's a pain in the ass, but ES6 is an amazing language.
Yeah, it's not bad. I like
better.
it.
I like my type safety.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's necessary.
That's the strong typing. That's been the. Well, I mean, before like the V8 engine, there was way more to hate about JavaScript.
Oh, absolutely. Well, even with the V8, just abstracted away a lot of that hate, but it was still there.
Yeah, and then just the strong typing. The strong typing argument has been like the longest standing one.
There's TypeScript.
It's just with JavaScript, if you don't kind of follow that yourself, you're taking a huge performance hit when you look at like just memory usage alone of like how much dynamic dispatch needs to be done under the hood in V8.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I mean, strongly typed JavaScript is relatively new because we need
that's not. There isn't actual strongly typed JavaScript. It's a way to write your JavaScript to say, ensure that the variable is always this type, so that way under the hood the bytecode being generated by V8. TypeScript is another transpiled language.
Okay. Is that strongly typed JavaScript?
It just does that the work for you to say, make sure this variable is always this type, and then in the transpiler...
Is that strongly typed JavaScript?
What?
Is that strongly typed JavaScript?
No, it's a higher level language that is strongly typed, that boils down to JavaScript.
Okay, great.
It'd be like saying that Rust is a garbage collected language because it protects against memory, but it does that at compile time instead of at runtime.
Wonderful. Let's move on to something else. Have any of you been to Dallas recently?
No.
Wow.
What's in Dallas?
A bunch of sirens that went off on Friday night because of a hacker. That's right. A hacker that might actually be within the Dallas metro area managed to get into their whatever air raid alarm system they have and just trigger the alarms in the city of Dallas Friday night, and the city officials were not able to turn it off until 90 minutes into the sirens.
Dallas has air raid sirens?
It's some kind of air raid or terrorist attack or just everything's, stuff's going down.
In case the Japanese are getting crazy.
On their defensive equipment down there.
Chuck Norris is rolling into town. Maybe that's why. Sirens.
That could happen. It's very troubling.
It's announcing the homecoming of the Ranger.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In your bunkers, don't make eye contact.
That sounds right.
Exactly.
If you have a beard, shave it.
To expose your third fist.
No other beards in town at the time of the Norris.
So, hackers activate havoc-wreaking hell sirens in Dallas. Let's hear it from our news department. Pneumonia presents News to Use. Dallas, Friday, April 7th. The city of Dallas emitted a loud shriek late Friday night, startling residents across the city for over an hour, flooding the 911 center for Dallas metro area. Apparently, all of Dallas's 156 sirens were activated by a hack, potentially originating in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. City officials would not elaborate more on the issue. Residents were treated to 15 90-second cycles of a siren, only to be used in the most dire of circumstances. At one point, city officials thought they had disarmed the sirens, when in fact they began to alarm again shortly thereafter. This attack is yet another example of why serious pieces of infrastructure should not be available to the public internet. But what does this mean for computer security going forward? Only time will tell. And so many Americans are afraid of what happens next. We at least know the world still turns and the truth marches on. And that's why this has been News to Use. Brought to you by Pneumonia.
So the first thing I'd say is, you ever hear of Stuxnet? Because the ending point of keeping your critical infrastructure off of the public internet, Stuxnet was something that attacked Iranian nuclear power plants that were completely disconnected from the public internet, and yet they were still attacked. So clearly there are still ways for people to hack.
I mean, there are some
stuff.
really funky bits of malware that can even just like listen. It uses use the microphone to hear what keys that you're clicking or something like that.
What?
There's ways. There are pretty scary ways of bridging the air gap between systems. It is not. It is really the 21st century. But judging by how city and just generally how government officials like to not secure things, I'm sure that it wasn't all too difficult for someone to log on and figure out how to fire off these sirens.
One of the crazier research projects I heard about that I was near when I was in the military was using super high speed cameras like 44,000 frames a second to back out audio signatures from oscillations and like ambient light sources. So like you'd have a light bulb in a room where someone's talking, and you could point this camera at a window from like whatever distance, and you could essentially back out the audio signature based on the vibrations of the light bulb filament from the person talking in the room.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was one of the craziest ones. Or even just like the vibrations in the window pane itself would like cause enough variation in the light to where you would be able to back out an audio recording.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, here's a bit of malware. It's called Bad BIOS, and I actually just pulled this up. It's this is from Ars Technica. Meet Bad BIOS, the mysterious Mac and PC malware that jumps air gaps. Like a super strain of bacteria, this rootkit plaguing Dragos RUIU is omnipotent.
We're probably better off just not reading the article verbatim and discussing it.
Thank you. But I wanted to get to the point of, how it worked. How does this work, Christian?
I don't see the article on the outline, so I didn't get a chance to look at this.
Stopped me from reading it.
It probably just checks out all your nearby devices that show up on all your, general GUIs anyway. Like when you check for printers, you check for all the different stuff on AirBook or whatever, that Mac Air thing, Airport, that you can share files on.
Not exactly.
Well, so it's called Bad BIOS?
Yes.
Just taking a guess here, it's a malware installed into the firmware of your motherboard that'll actually be able to attack pretty much every layer above from the BIOS itself, and also
I think we're postulating
the BIOS, which would allow you to then, while the computer is technically off, but there's still a power line going to the computer, execute code.
It's pretty nuts.
You know what? Actually, you're right. That's probably what this does. It just it infects the. No, because that's not what this. I'm sorry. I thought this was like what I had talked about, where you could. It's something with like the speakers and the keyboard and the something. I'll have to look it up for next time.
Well, that's because you're in the BIOS. You're able to talk to every piece of hardware without having to deal with a driver at that point.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty low level.
It's
like the lowest level.
Yes. And speaking of low-level attacks, we can talk about some low-level people and the problem that the tech industry has with bro culture in startups. But before...
Bro, come on.
Before we get to that, really quickly, I wanted to talk about... Do you want to quickly just go around the, quote, room and talk about just a quick... startup experiences that we've had? Because we've all been on startups or we're working at startups now.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You go last, Christian.
Okay.
Let's have our guest, Ryan, go first.
I was just going to talk about what's going on with Uber, man. They, I I don't know.
No, startups that you worked on.
Oh, startups
Or
that I worked on?
that you've been associated with. Like the one that you're, the startup. I guess you already, the accelerator that
the
you're
one
on
that I'm in
is
now.
kind of
So it's kind of funny. Our startup, the idea came from probably the least techie and most, I wouldn't say broy, but came from like an equities trader who's a bit of a dick. He's like really sensitive to any situation where he may be getting taken advantage of, and he's like. He kind of stalemated a lot of the progress of the company, and his co-founder is really like rightfully the CEO. The guy is much more balanced in his thinking, handles meetings and discussions really well. And then they eventually brought in my buddy Tim, who sort of saved their company from the wastebasket last year, and he did all the tech work to get their product across the line and get it to where they could actually like field users. But in exchange, he took like a fifth of the company, and then I came on really just because I was working with Tim, and then I came out here to be part of this accelerator, really, so I could be like the lead dev on this project and have my name on something that went in front of like VC. So that's sort of been like the value prop for me, but yeah, I mean, I feel like the people that have these ideas and push them through and get attention for them initially, you tend to have a broier person that's like spearheading it. They're like the Spartan at the front of the line. It makes way for like more sound thinking.
So, where are you living in Boulder? Do they put you up at a place, or?
Yeah, so Kevin and Wes, they have a friend named Asa who owns the Adventure Lodge. There's like an outdoorsy hotel type thing that this dude owns, and he also has a house up in like Sunshine Canyon that we're staying at.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you? Do they give you any sort of money or per diem or some food or something like that? Or do they just expect you to have money?
Well, the accelerator gives you like
$20,000. Oh, is that at the beginning?
Yeah. So they give you like $20,000 just for your startup to pay for whatever you got to pay for while you're here, and they take like 6% of your company. So that's kind of the deal. And then in exchange, they put you in front of their network of people. It includes just a bunch of different like angel investors and some VC, and they just have access to a ton of good people. I was sitting on a bench like a week or two ago, handling some nonsense back in LA, like over the phone. I got done. I'm like sitting on the bench, just like rubbing my temples, and this older woman's like sitting next to me on the bench, and we start chatting about startup stuff and coding and whatever. And she's like, oh yeah, well back when I was making Priceline, and I'm like, what? And then like a few other things. She's been part of like seven different large companies. This woman's name's like Bernie, and she was like, yeah, back when I was programming in assembly back in the 80s. I'm like, Jesus. But her name's like Bernie Strom. Like they have a really cool network of people they have access to at these accelerators.
Now thinking at the meta level, how profitable is the startup accelerator game? Like, how much money do you have to start a startup accelerator?
I think you would need sponsors more than anything else. You
need a network of people, and then just like a cash flow of people trying to fund.
So angel investors.
Yeah, I mean, you would need. Yeah,
but it's not just a VC firm. It's more than
well,
that.
No, angel investors don't have to be a VC firm at all. They could be even your grandmother writing you a check.
Yeah,
technically,
this is a very involved startup, a very involved accelerator too. Like they get into the psychology of the stuff, and they essentially have classes like a few times a week where they'll bring in like whoever their local experts are on on like branding and pitch and storytelling for pitches and stuff, and they'll just bring these people through like over and over again just to get people up to speed and help you build your value proposition and make whatever pivots you guys need to make and all that stuff.
That sounds really cool. And when do you go in front of Kevin O'Leary?
Oh my God! Actually, Wes. Wes actually did apply to get us in front of Shark Tank. I don't know.
Yeah?
Yeah, he actually did apply to get in front of him.
What kind of first, what kind of Bible do you have to sign to get into the Startup Accelerator? Like, I'm sure that agreement is probably...
They had to restructure the company, so they had to convert to a C corp so they could issue shares and do all that stuff. So there was some legal footwork that went on. I actually wasn't part of that. Man, I'm getting this little cough coming up, but I wasn't actually part of that facet of it, which I'm pretty grateful that I wasn't.
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's been some maneuvering with that. I know they definitely went through some jumping through hoops to convert themselves over to a C corp, so that they were ready for it.
Versus what? An S corp?
I think they're just an LLC. Yeah, they're probably an S corp before, but
Gotcha.
you need to be able to issue shares if you're going to be an accelerator, obviously.
Right.
So
God, that makes sense. All right, why don't we go to Tyler? Why don't you talk about the startups that you've been on, and maybe the one that you work for now?
Yeah, that one's that's a great case. The core group was definitely I think 3 or 4 guys. So
which one was this?
This is Little Star. This is the company I'm at now. We're a 360 and VR media company. And
closer to the mic, please. Sorry.
Oh, sure. And we certainly don't have a bro culture at all. Now we're close to 20 people, and we're pretty well balanced between guys and girls. But in the beginning, there certainly was a period of 3 coders in a room, all males, all certainly using the word bro a lot. However, there has never been any protein powder of any sort in the office or weightlifting.
No creatine.
No sweatbands. No tracksuits.
Well, that's just the Italian mob. That's not a startup.
Sorry, I grew up around Italian, so the bros and the Italians is like a gray line intertwined with me. Certainly no bro culture, but I mean, as much as you can not be a bro culture with, in the startup world, there's always certainly, like Ryan was saying, there's just a little bit of dudes in a room together hacking away. Sometimes it's pretty common, and the word bro gets thrown out a lot, even though no one's lifting weights, no one's being bro. No one's got a lifted truck outside.
Right.
It'd be like an Alabama bro, I guess.
Alabama bro.
I feel like that's like the more general use of bro. I feel like in this startup context, there's this whole other kind of bro that, particularly that article that we'll go into
after this. Yes.
It focuses on where it's not really like the weightlifter. It's more of like just like that, they complain about like that real like dude, like the type who's like.
Well, why don't you save it till we get to the article?
Yeah, no, I know.
So instead of that,
I'm just trying to clear up any miscommunications.
I agree with you saying there. It's more like they're trying to It's less like they're trying to stereotype a type of person. It's more like they're just trying to make the word bro mean misogynist again.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's
another code word for misogyny.
It's becoming one, which is rude because sometimes I call my bros bro, and I'm not a bro, and now people are assuming my bro gender identity, and I don't appreciate it.
Tyler, did I tell you that white milk is racist?
Really? The New York Times suggested that white trash is racist.
Okay, we're getting off track.
Sorry.
Christian, why don't you tell us about the startups that you've been on?
Sure. So my current company is an interesting one because we're kind of at that point where we're on the fence of startup versus slightly larger company that you can't really call a startup.
When does that happen? Not yet
that's a good
girl,
question.
not quite a woman.
It's definitely not like a night and day difference. It's more of like this gray area that we're in right now. Of like we're hiring pretty fast, and we're a pretty substantial company now. We're well over 60 people, and our tech team is getting larger, and we're hoping to get even larger. And we just released an awesome bit of software recently, so our platform is really substantial now. It's not like a MVP running out in production like a lot of startups feel like their production is still just the MVP. And so that's where I'm now. And in the past, I've worked at about several startups, anything ranging from early stage startups to kind of that late stage, like where I am now, where it's that are we still a startup? Are we kind of like a standalone company that isn't really relying on like the usual kind of like skim everything? I shouldn't say skim. trim the fat everywhere you can to basically spend money on only the absolute needed, and things like that a lot of startups have to really scrounge cash for.
Gotcha. Okay, and then I'll close it out. And since I always like to have a certain kind of energy when I ramble on, I'll play some music. My first startup was called Rate the Professional in the year 2009. No. Actually, it was. It was Rate the Professional in 2009. I've been on 3 startups in 10 years because it was my goal before I turned 30 to become an internet billionaire. And I turned 30 in 6 weeks.
You got 6 weeks then.
Yeah.
That's like enough time
right, I
to do stuff.
You totally got this.
Totally got
Yeah,
this.
man.
The first one was called Rate the Professional in 2009. It was like right as I was going to graduate college, and we wanted to be an East Coast Yelp before people on the East Coast really knew what Yelp was. And we, instead of like their kind of like casual, just hippies in tropical shirts complaining that their food isn't hot enough, we wanted to have like guys in suits that go around and rate businesses, and that was basically it. And
Is that what Rate the Professional was?
Yeah, it was ways that you could rate professionals. Not Rate My Professor, or what was the other one that people thought it was? Rape the Professional. We got that one a lot. Yeah, and so we made a first version that looked horrible, but it did work. You could call that the MVP, though we weren't using that word because Silicon Valley hadn't started airing yet. No. So we did that. It was actually written entirely in PHP, and it was not really using a framework. It was a horrible bit of code. But that was the website where I hit the 10,000 hour mark with web design. And if you look at everything I did before then and everything after then, there's a very stark difference, and it all happened while I was on a lot of Adderall back in 2009. That fell apart. Second startup I was on was in 2012. This was just me. It was called Juniper. And the idea was making a DIY website creator. So, like a mini Squarespace, this was right before Squarespace blew up.
Were you actually incorporated with this?
No.
Okay, I was going to say, because there's Juniper, the company that builds the network switches that...
There's Juniper, yeah, I know, there's a big name, but...
that could also been like a Jewish potpourri company.
That's funny.
No?
Juniper.
I want to laugh, but I'm in hot water for last week.
That was funny. Anyway, no, so what happened was that started from a PHP framework that I had developed and refined into the PHP framework that I use now, or used to use, or whatever, Nimbus, which is actually on my GitHub. And it allowed you, the idea was that you can make your own website in 60 seconds. And you just answered a few questions and selected a template, and then you would have your website. And that would be a way that we could just that would be our quick, elevator pitch, competitive advantage. But what happened was, right around when we were like, it was basically me working on it, and I had one investor, and then just someone else I was just like consulting with. And this was when I was living in Pittsburgh. And there was not really any... And this probably was my fault. Not really any work ethic, no real project management, no real kind of drum beat. It was just me kind of on my own doing it. And that might have contributed to the failure. But also, soon thereafter, Squarespace got a Super Bowl commercial, and I realized that I can't, in my little basement in Pittsburgh, compete with Squarespace at that point, so I had to hang it up. And then the third startup was Room That, which is the one that 3 of us were on. Sorry, Ryan. And that was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, June of 2015, and that was Tinder for roommates, and
and so much more.
And so much more. I was in charge of the design, Christian was in charge of the infrastructure, and Tyler, you kind of swung between both, and both of us yelled at you.
I'd say more than infrastructure, it was CTO, so there's that.
I was hanging out, I was writing code, I was company morale, okay?
Yeah.
Wait, so how'd that go? What'd you guys run into with that?
I'd say a big part of it was I don't know. I kind of do you guys feel okay if I were to badmouth it a little bit?
Is there good mouthing to be had about it?
You want to good mouth it first?
Yeah, I'll good mouth it. It was it was a good experience from a technical perspective. I'd say I guess because I was CTO, I kind of was like my ideal stack at the time. What's funny is my ideal stack now is totally different. But
and that kind of forced me out of LampStack, which is I had been really arrogantly using that for a long time, and I had to relearn I basically had to relearn web design during that startup, just because I really had to come to terms with how the industry has changed and how the medium is changing.
Yeah,
go on.
I'd say for all of us, it was a real learning experience in some way or another. For me, it was first time I was managing friends, so that was a little touch and go.
Shut up!
No, I'm being honest. It was just
you know that.
It was just a little different for me. Of like, how do I find the middle ground there?
So yeah, but what about the actual like business of it? What'd you guys try to do for customer acquisition and stuff? What'd you guys?
So we didn't, and this is part of why it didn't really work out, is we didn't get to that point in large because the non-technical side of the company didn't really want to do anything until we had a product.
And that was one guy. His name was Steven.
Oh, that's...
And he was Swedish. He didn't really sound
and
like that.
I'd say, kind of like sum up all those issues around that, though, is really just inexperience on that side of first startup and just in general, inexperience with business.
Now, the coolest thing about RoomThat is that I designed the whole thing around a cube. And this is my swan song.
It'd have been the coolest thing if it was built quicker.
I remember you talking about the cube thing. That was
it was beautiful because it only has one button, and then it's 3D navigation. So you would just swipe up to the nav face, and then every section is a face of the cube. You swipe up to the nav, and then the nav leads to all the other faces. It's perfect. And then you only need one button. That one button just goes to the nav, and then you could just go anywhere you want. If you go to the bottom face, you can log out.
And if Eric spent half the time on developing it as he did on the marketing aspect of it, we would have been crushing it. No, I'm totally kidding.
Was not my job to do the marketing. The problem was that it wasn't usable. It wasn't just that... maybe I should have prototyped it months earlier. I decided it's 2020, as I'm wearing a Bernie Sanders t-shirt.
Yeah, actually,
but
we had a shit ton of experience with... like our app, as soon as we got into the accelerator, within the first week, they just like sent us out to start grabbing people off the street and talking to customers, and start getting a sense of how...
did you have to prototype a design or some implementation?
We already had a V1 of the product, so it was already on the market, and we just had to deal with the problems that it had. And there's essentially two big things. One, it was asking for way too much shit up front. It was asking people for their Amazon login, for an address, and like a credit card, and then your Amazon login again. It just looked super sketch. And so that was like the onboarding is a horror. And then it didn't really remind you of its existence. So this product is it's called Shadow Bid. You can actually get it, and you can get the V1 in the Chrome store. It's just going to ask you for a creepy amount of information. But the other thing is it's a Chrome extension that lives on top of Amazon, and it was doing nothing to remind you of its existence. And so after like a week or two of digging through like customer interviews and then watching people use Amazon, we started changing how we interacted with people. So we started dropping in toast messages with some creative statistics. So people would be looking at whatever product, and we'd use what we knew about the price history to start telling them how much this thing was above or below average and what the price change frequency is. And so that's like the new feature, like in the beta, and also like the icon changes to show like an up arrow or a down arrow depending on what the price is like currently, like above or below average. And then we also have like an automatic buying tool. So instead of just like giving you a price alert, like if something changes price in the middle of the night, it'll actually just execute for you. But that's no one else in the market's really doing that, partly because of the liabilities of like holding credit card numbers and stuff, and then just the complexities of going in and executing a bid on someone's Amazon account is can be like a little bit prohibitive. So like that's the problem that we really solved. And but then the interfacing around it and interacting with the customer to make sure that we're being like relevant to their shopping experience has been like what we've been working on with V2 and what we just put out to user testing and stuff this weekend.
And how's that going? How did that go?
I'll hear back from Kevin tomorrow because he's the one who's been like overseeing that and building out the user test. I actually had never even heard of usertesting.com before. Do you guys know about this thing?
Yeah, I came across it, I want to say about a year and a half ago.
Have you used it?
We were debating using it or not. We decided to go with kind of a more traditional outsourced QA firm as opposed to user testing.
Gotcha. It's pretty cool. Like you basically you create a series of prompts like what you want them to accomplish, and they will have like a YouTube like a camera in the background. And a user will just like narrate their way through like trying to use something for the first time. I've seen a couple examples of it. It's pretty cool. It's a good idea, and you can get paid to do it. Like if you're really strapped for cash, you can go and do some user testing for some startup. But yeah, it's a pretty cool platform. So we've built some of the new features for V2, and we're just starting to get feedback now before we start the next heat or the next sprint of work to get ourselves to get this thing all wired up to our old API and get the second version out the door so we can be all shiny for investors.
What is this built in?
The first variant of it they had coded up by some intern in like Angular 1. And then the API is written on a node seed this guy Ish out in LA built, and he's used this API seed for like, I don't know, it must be like a dozen different projects, including another client project that I've been working on called like Rapid Replay. It's a pretty cool little app. But yeah, it's like,
whoa, Ryan, I think you're Cyloning.
Cyloning?
Oh yeah, we had some electromagnetic interference just now. I don't know what happened.
Oh no!
Did you hear that?
I didn't get it at all.
Oh yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're being possessed. But why don't we move on and talk about the problem with bro culture in the tech industry?
With Uber,
among other things, the tech industry has a problem with bro culture. People have been complaining about it for years, yet nobody has done much to fix it. That may finally change if the people in charge of Silicon Valley, venture capitalists who control the money, or Jews, start to realize. Sorry. Sorry.
The Rothschilds.
Start to realize that the real problem with tech bros is that they're being boorish jerks. Listen, I walked 8 miles to a place called Kosher Palace today to buy food for my Passover Seder. Can I make that joke?
You're Jewish. You get to drop all the Jewish jokes you want.
Yeah, exactly. Look at Uber, that ride-hailing startup that most people really love. It's the biggest tech unicorn in the world with a valuation of nearly $69 billion. Not long ago, Uber seemed invincible. Now it's in free fall, and the top executives have fled. The company's woes springing entirely from its toxic bro culture created by its chief executive, Travis Kalanick. Kalanick,
I think is the actual. I actually heard that a couple weeks ago. I think it's Kalanick.
Kalanick.
Hey, and really quickly, what is bro culture? Basically, a world that favors young men at the expense of everyone else. You were right, Tyler. A broco has a bro CEO or a CE bro, usually a young man who has little work experience but is good-looking, cocky, and slightly immoral. A hustler.
So, instead of reading the entire article, maybe now we can go into kind of more insight on this. And what I will say is they do make a good argument of the idea of a lot of these companies have inexperienced C-level people. And the ones that do seem to be successful are the ones that then recognize that and then hire some more experienced people to be kind of the intermediate, what's the right word? Kind of like a lot of like the other C-levels or the VPs will be these more experienced people in those situations to be able to handle issues like this. Like one of those things is you look at Facebook. youngest successful entrepreneur out there at the time when he was getting started, Mark Zuckerberg. But a little unknown thing is the fact that he basically just hired, all right, who's the best known people within either him or the VC's networks that he can get to handle these a bit more both delicate situations as well as some of them situations that he just was too green for.
Yeah, I haven't actually looked at who's on the Facebook board or who the C-level people are, but is it a bunch of 50-year-old guys? Is it like just Mark and then?
I think nowadays though it's actually a bit more of like 30 to 40 something. In fact, I'd go out on a limb and say it seemed to be maybe about 5 years ago. It was the trend to have these like young 20-something-year-olds at the helm of all these companies. Now I'd say that's been a bit more normalized, and you'll see, I'd say like mid to late 30s and early 40s are bulk of what I actually see at startups these days.
Gotcha. I mean, I think Kalanick got a little hamstrung with some of this nonsense. Like, have you got any of you guys watched the video with the cab driver?
Yeah.
I don't believe I have,
which
actually.
one?
The video they keep referencing where they say that Kalanick quote unquote berated an Uber driver. It's really the opposite way around. Like, it was this rather cocky driver that was like trying to tell Travis how to like run his company and how like they should just a very bland argument from a very bland person saying like we should be paid more because driving is some kind of super noble profession or some bullshit. I don't know. It didn't make any sense. But like Travis, I think was actually pretty like he was pretty measured in his response. He was like fairly patient with the guy and was actually trying to explain like some of the history of what Uber had done. And the guy just like kept laying into like telling him, we can raise the price. We can like, no, we wouldn't be competitive. And so like I thought that specific point was like totally unfair. And like I personally I find the media very annoying for some of the ways it treats things. I mean, the discrimination stuff and the sexual harassment stuff was pretty egregious. Like going throughout the company, like that stuff is valid, but then I don't know, they're trying to like snowball a bunch of other nonsense into.
It seems like a general media takedown of Uber.
Yeah, that's obnoxious. I mean,
and it was an Uber black driver that said, I have personally lost over $100,000 because of you.
What? No, that's just because if you make a bad business decision, it's not the fault of your transaction processor that you suck at numbers. You know? No one made him sign a lease for a car or sign with
Uber. Right.
Yeah.
You could be just a regular livery.
Yeah, you could have just gotten a livery license and just gone and hung out at the airport.
You have to have a livery license anyway, I believe, in New York at least.
Yeah, I think you do in most places. If you want to be like a Uber black driver or if you want to do like Uber Lux and stuff, you have to get the livery license and all. They're expensive as shit too. I think a livery license in LA is like $1,500.
How much is a medallion?
You can just drive Uber regardless. When I was down there, I just had just about every walk of life as an Uber driver.
I mean, you can drive for Uber just fine, but if you want to get higher rates and stuff and be an Uber Black driver or a Lux driver, you typically have to get a livery license and all that stuff.
How much does a medallion cost for a cab?
I'm sure it's obnoxious.
I think we're the wrong group to be asking that.
Oh
yeah,
you don't have any Italian relatives that would know that, Christian?
Maybe back in like the 1920s, but my Italian side of my family wasn't even here back then, I don't think.
I mean, I really think Uber doesn't get enough credit for what they did. Like, when's the last time you got into a medallion cab and said, this smells great? This is a good place to be.
Or got into a regular yellow cab at all. I don't know.
Yeah, because it sucks, so we don't do it.
I used Uber, yeah.
I found in San Francisco people were more fans of Lyft. I don't know if that's a cultural thing there. I asked about that because the people that I saw all use Lyft, and they were like, well, there's a terrible company, so we don't like it. It's like, oh, okay.
Stupid. Yeah, that's the argument I usually hear. And granted that there is definitely, I'd say, a shortage of women in tech companies, particularly on the dev teams, I'd say. that said, I work for a company with a director of engineering who's a female, and she's awesome. And I feel it does help balance out the workplace. Like, I've worked for companies in the past where I've felt that it's just almost too much just dude time all the time kind of stuff going on, and it does kind of create this unhealthy culture in the company.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm personally I always just get out and go meet girls after work. It seems to be fine. Seems to work out okay. You just have to have the discipline to not work all the time.
Right.
But yeah,
is that all that you want to say about CE Bros?
It's about CE Bros. I'm actually kind of a Kalanick fan. I think.
I mean, Uber definitely. I think they have the first mover advantage, or something that I don't think of Lyft when I want to get a random car.
Yeah, they Kleenexed the service.
They really did. They Googled the service. Sorry.
And you know what? I'm also a big fan of because before the tech industry and before I was reading another article today about super voting shares. Like, the reason that they're not going to be able to replace Travis without Travis deciding to step down out of his own volition is super voting shares. There's a dual class structure in the shares of Uber, which has been the case.
What is that?
For a lot of tech companies, it's just part of the reason that that's how they can bring in a lot of investors and get their equity really diluted. I think Travis probably owns less than a quarter of Uber. Zuckerberg, same thing. I think Travis owns 6% or some silly.
What is a super voting share?
It's a class of shares where when it comes to board decisions, you could have a handful of seats on the board that don't just have one vote. They've got 10 or 20 or 70 votes.
Oh, and
wasn't
they
there
tend to be independent of your equity shares?
Yeah.
But these are that actually say, this is my influence in a way in the company, as opposed to this is my.
So it's more than a 1-to-1 ratio for votes to shares.
Yeah. It's it was a creative equity or strategy to create these super voting positions and shares so that founders could make bolder moves and bring in more people without having to have their influence diluted or get kicked out of their companies, like what happened to Steve Jobs.
Right.
And so that really can't happen with Travis Kalanick, and it can't happen, or Kalanick, and it can't happen with Mark Zuckerberg. I think that's generally for the better, and I do think it was kind of offensive, because we had for years and years and years Harvard and the Ivy League bullshit sort of had control over. Once your company got to a certain size, it was going to be handed over to an Ivy League dick. That's really was the structure for years and years and years before, and still is the case in most industries. But in tech, we are protecting the scruffier. We're protecting the scruffier founder from being replaced by
business school
idiots.
Jerk-offs.
Yeah, jerks from the Hamptons.
I'd say that's kind of the glamorized view of it, but I'd say that's not statistically speaking accurate. I'd say for one, it's kind of any industry these days where you're kind of a young company as opposed to an existing company, you do seem to have the existing founder. But a lot of these companies that really take off, it's either through connections or you get just plain lucky and you get into something like an accelerator or things like that. And then there's the other side of it, though, too, where you do have a lot of these startups where, hey, somebody graduated Columbia, even NYU's got a lot of these connections to help you, and all of a sudden you have this startup idea, and you have your alma mater there being like, oh, we'll hook you up with some of these alumni here. They're a bunch of investors, and all of a sudden you get all that in, and it's either you are that Ivy League person, or they'll be like, oh, hey, we'll give you a bunch of advisors who are that Ivy League person who are kind of controlling from the shadows there.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but I'm a fan of this concept that you can't replace the core guys unless they want to be replaced or they want to leave.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But that wasn't the case for years. So I do think I'm a big fan of the dual class structure when it comes, or the dual. The dual whatever that's called, the dual share structure with with companies in the last couple decades or so.
Well, let's. I want to talk about stock and equity and shares and dilution and figuring out if you were asked to be part of a startup, how do you know what the best amount of equity you should get? I mean, you may not have a choice, but if you're asked, what are you looking for? How do you figure out the answer to that question?
I mean, I think you got to kind of know the valuation of what you're dealing with.
All right, you got to do your research.
And so you have to do. And what is the research exactly?
I'd say a big telling one is if they do have some kind of public indication of their last funding round.
And let's say they don't. Let's say they're kind of a new startup and they don't really. They want you to help build their MVP. And they can't really pay you. So they'll give you.
I guess let's be a little more specific here. Say this is a company that is just starting out. There are a bunch of founders looking for people to actually start building out the product.
And let's say the founders don't want to actually do a lot of the grunt work. They're the idea people.
Sure.
Which already imposes a risk because you've got 3 people then that may not actually be building. They might just be there.
Sure. Well, the number of people could be whatever, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's when I say the number of people, it's more in terms of the percentage of the company that they kind of reserve.
And there's a lot of ways to. Okay, yeah. There's a lot of ways to actually do get like a very general idea of how much equity would be worth there. One thing is to actually look at like what are they asking for, particularly if they have some public way of displaying this. Like if they're on Angel List and they're looking for investors through there, you can usually get an idea of what their valuation would be. If they're if they are people from these top-notch schools, generally you'll have a higher evaluation than somebody who is a dropout, for instance. And trying to look for the right word here. Additionally, if they have successful startups in the past, you can get a general idea of where the equity would be, the value of the equity would be, as opposed to somebody who this is their first startup that they're doing.
Okay, but let's say it is your first startup.
As a founder.
I mean, like when we were doing RoomThat,
Sure.
how much equity do you want? Well, I don't know. It's a new thing. I'd want as much as possible. But then you also have to reserve some for dilution. You have to reserve some. So, like, how do you figure that out?
That is a tougher one to figure out. That is one that you have to do the math of what is the current marketplace there, and then you look at who are the people on the team at the moment, who kind of has the direction, and that's kind of something I didn't do and regret not doing. And I'd say another part of it was the fact that kind of just be like. What is kind of like the actual plan to get funding? Does this person have contacts that they are is this person who is also looking to form the startup right away? Are they also kind of got at least like, hey, they can reach out to such and such ventures or so and so who is just a general investor type person. Technical phrase there, investor type person. If they can reach out to these as well as get the startup going, because I'd say from what you see with these more successful startups is the fact that they hit the ground running. They are both building the application and getting funding at the same time. In a lot of these cases where it's kind of coming out of thin air, there is the idea of bootstrapping that became pretty popular, of saying don't really go for funding, try to do as much of it as out of pocket as possible until you start profiting.
Nowadays, you almost need traction before you can even talk about getting funding.
Oh yeah, that is done best, I'd say, in areas where you've had prior success.
Yeah.
Say you had a company that sold, and you're looking to do a new one, and you take that money that you got from your last startup, and you bootstrap your company from there, and it's in a similar space, maybe not competing, but you can be like, hey, so-and-so who was CTO at such and such company is going off and doing this new thing, check it out, it's pretty cool. That's where bootstrapping seems to work best.
I'm a big fan of trying to get into a company when it's sort of on its last leg in like pre-seed funding. It seems like if you've got a good tech mind about you, that there are plenty of opportunities to get into startups with more non-technical founders when they've wasted their money on a few dev teams and they've gotten something 80% done. And at that point, like, the company is basically in the wastebasket unless you or someone similar to you steps in and does the rest of the work for free. And I think in those positions, like, you can definitely get 10%, 20% of someone's idea. I mean, I've seen, like, in this case, like, my buddy Tim has done that a couple of times, including with this startup that we're in now.
That's honestly, I mean, that's a very predatory but probably quite lucrative practice.
I mean, how else do you want to go about it? Do you envision the tables like things to be like any more equanimous from the other direction? Like, if someone has a startup and things are all relatively together, and they just want to bring you in as a replaceable tech guy. They don't have to give you that much of their idea at all.
They might not even give you any equity.
Yeah.
They might just give you cash. Yeah.
Well, I'd say the ideal situation there for an early stage startup is you come in at the ground floor, and it really is like your dream team there of like, this is who I wanted working on the front end, this is who I wanted working on the back end, here's who I wanted doing the infrastructure, or hey, we're just a bunch of devs who can really do any of this stuff, and I'm really comfortable with them. And we've got a great business guy, we've got a great marketing guy. By business guy, I mean like somebody who can work with the VCs really well. And I think that's one thing that I see, at least in my experience, far fewer startups are good with VCs than the idea of customer acquisition on the business side. And it's the ones that are good with the VCs that really do well.
We've heard some interesting rules of thumb about dealing with VC. We have a couple of finance guys who come in here and give us like sort of briefings every week, and having us like build out financial models and stuff. And one of the conundrums they talk about with bringing VC into any project is as soon as you get your first tranche of like VC money, it almost seems like immediately the first thing that VCs want you to do is go out and raise more money, despite the fact that it dilutes their position as well. So you get into a position where you're inevitably spending less time on the business than you would like to be spending.
That makes sense in the situation of going through an accelerator. That's kind of part of what the company's there to do, really, is to kind of do that round, an entire round of funding. And when you're doing a round of funding, that makes sense. I'd say that knowing when to define the stop for a round of funding, regardless of the company's age, I feel like that can really make or break a company.
Yeah, I agree. Because you get into like, what's that? They say like you should be estimating like 6 to 9 months for a funding round. It seems to be about how long it takes from when you start the conversation to where you can actually get someone to write a check. And
I'd say it changes as you grow as a company. For like a seed round, I would say that's true. Series A, that's true. But then you get to like that Series B and maybe a Series C, or I've even heard of some companies with a Series D round. And with those, it's usually much quicker. You might be dealing with higher evaluations, but less equity there, so it's kind of naturally quicker there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, is 1% of the fully diluted shares, I believe that's a not standard. No, percentage. 1% of the fully diluted shares, I believe that is a not standard but frequently used first kind of offering of compensation for early stage startups, or maybe just employees of startups. Is that wrong, Christian? I'm waiting for you to say no, that's not true. Is that true?
Well, it's kind of like one of those things where it all depends on the company there. It's true and it's not true.
Got it. Okay, well. I mean, it came from these articles that we're reading. Anyway, the one thing that I wanted to mention is that if you were offered 1% of you got it on the ground floor, and it's, let's say that this example says that there are 11 million shares. I don't know where you come up with. Where do you come up with the number of shares outstanding?
10 million shares is sort of a baseline. That's what most VCs expect. It's closer to a round number that's easy to divide up.
Is it like
amongst
the
the C-level
the
guys.
equivalent to a dollar value that you put into something?
Yeah.
Something?
So if I tell you that you have 10 million shares, and if that's like kind of a standard across the industry with new companies, then when I talk about a $1 or $2 share price, you roughly already know the valuation of the company in your head, right?
That makes sense. This, I guess, this is actually a real company, Ruckus Wireless. This is this is from a law blog, not Bob Loblaw's law blog. Damn it, I can't say it. Anyway, but it's not that, not that one. But if they say that you start out with 11,359,000 shares. And the VC or IPO price per share, the VC price per share is 23 cents. And if you were given the option to get 1% of that, that's 113,000 shares, roughly valued in this example for $25,750. Now, with Series B, what happens is they have to dilute the pool of equity to allow for further investment. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Typically,
yeah. They keep.
So you have, let's say you have. You've got 11 million shares, but now you need another round of funding, and you need to be able to have more shares to give out. What do you do?
So
Yeah, I think they start diluting ownership.
And that's just basically saying that we're doubling the amount of shares, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Just saying it's doubling. And then,
if I can interject, what I will say is that there's usually two paths to this. That's one of them. The other path is from the get-go setting up a dilution pool. So you have a certain percentage of the shares that are just saying nobody owns these. These are to be given for funding, and we'll dilute them as need be.
Gotcha. Well, in this example of Ruckus Wireless, they actually went through 7 rounds of funding. Gee.
That's not unheard of.
Your $25,000 initial 1% actually balloons up to $618,000 by the Series G they IPO'd. Your 1% will be at $1.7 million. So, that's not nothing from just a little sliver of a company.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool trick.
Yes, but it relies on, I guess, dilution and further investment. Is that what it is?
That sounds right. I don't have a whole lot of insight to that. I haven't spent too much time thinking about equity rounds and stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the make or break with the monetary success slice of the startup, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know. I guess call me old-fashioned. I think just building a product that works, that has a good consumer acquisition model and can scale effectively. I think it doesn't really matter how you slice it as long as you don't.
Yeah, but if you build a product that works, but you don't own enough of it, you're not really gonna.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you just keep your wits about you and try to keep a handle on as much of your company as you can. And try to minimize the amount of investment you take. I mean, I think it's probably too easy to get into. The Silicon Valley mindset seems to be too heavily biased toward taking investment and burning cash and building a shinier product than you need to make to meet your customer acquisition goals.
Gotcha.
I just don't think it's terribly necessary. I mean, looking at on the LA startup scene, I just don't see that as much. I see more people start building smaller, more humble ideas and building them out and getting traction earlier before they even start talking about funding. And I mean, I feel like the kind of the funding first model of doing things, where you have a bunch of cash burn and then you try to work your way towards something that people actually give a shit about, is it's getting old. And I think a lot of the fat is sort of getting cut out of the market over time, where you have to actually demonstrate more of a business before anyone will entertain the idea of handing you money for no reason.
Do you think we're in a bubble, or were in a bubble, and it's starting to deflate?
I don't think so. I think it's just an industry that's kind of maturing. Building a tech company is not. It's getting to be less and less sizzle and more actual functional product that you actually have to bring to the market before anyone can take you seriously.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no more Yo app.
Yeah, people know what it is now. Back in the 90s and 2000s, early 2000s, you would have people you'd have your tech people that had these ideas and ideas they thought they would fly, and then like older people with money, they'd be like, I have no idea what you're doing, but it's probably awesome. Here's money. Like, those days are like getting old. Like nowadays, people can reason by analogy. They roughly know what your product does, and they can much more intelligently gauge the likelihood of success. And like,
but then you can start to sell apps like people pitch movies, where it's like Snapchat plus, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hear that stuff.
Did somebody go somewhere?
I think it's
Tyler,
getting. Yeah, what is that?
I think
Is that someone going down a stairwell?
Tyler, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, Christian, are your neighbors coming home?
Yeah.
Neighbors.
Yeah.
New York City.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. This optimized for equity, not for cash. If you have an offer from an early-stage company, don't bother to negotiate incentive-based compensation, or MBOs, into your offer. It says don't bother to.
What is that?
You may be used to this kind of compensation scheme. I like how it says scheme at larger companies where it is quite common, but it just doesn't work at an early-stage startup. Christian, what is an MBO?
I have not heard of that before, actually.
But it says they're quite common in big companies. Well, whatever. Okay, what else? Negotiating on anything other than cash compensation and equity. This is a bad article.
I mean, it feels like a lot of those things feel like they're geared toward slightly larger startups, like not actual like
And that you would be
5,
hired
6,
as an
7 person teams. It seems like
Right.
We're saying
like
age,
Tyler. Like Tyler, you're hired as an employee at Little Star. You're not in the boiler room.
No, I'm a real boy.
You're not one of the bros. You're just
one of the close to
who
the
you
old
are.
circle. It's hard to get to the inner circle.
Yeah.
You got to be in the inner circle and just get lucky. You got to show up before anyone thinks it's worth anything. It's the hard part. It's the hard part, being in the right room at the right time.
That's true. And you just have to know, or else you can end up like me, having been on 3 startups that haven't worked out, and it just makes you an extremely cynical human being.
There's gambling in it,
anyway.
too. You just got to roll those dice and get in there.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break and talk about my little app that won't work for you, Ryan. I'm sorry.
Oh, the Where Am I one?
Yeah, Where Am I? I actually came up with an idea for a sequel to Where Am I called Next Train that will just tell you if you're in the subway station when the next train is coming. That's it. Which almost works. Not all the trains have real-time information. I think only 8 of them do. And the other ones have a timer based on the schedule, but trains don't really follow those schedules.
Did the city put together that API?
Yeah, the city has data sets. There's actually a node module for the MTA's schedule information. So you could actually type in the subway station, and it'll tell you the timetables for scheduling. And then Where Am I already has a list of all the subway stations. It's how as part of the app. So I can. It wouldn't be too difficult to be able to put this together. And I think I'm going to do that, but it doesn't exist yet. Though I did get the ball rolling by buying nexttrain.nyc. So look for that in the future. But this
have they repainted the stations yet, or is the paint still just like peeling off the walls in those stations?
It really depends on which one.
It varies greatly.
They all still smell like urine.
Okay.
So there's no.
Aside from the second half line.
I'm surprised.
It's like
I was
pressure
riding the queue
washers.
today, but it was not on 2nd Avenue. Anyway, San Franz, do you live in New York City? Well, if you do, Pneumonium has a beautiful new product for you. It's called Where Am I, your 5-borough compass navigator to help you get anywhere from Staten Island to the Bronx. Simply go to www.whereami.nyc and enable location services on your mobile device to find the neighborhood, borough, and 3 closest subway stops to you, wherever you are. No ads, no tracking, just geospatial brilliance. That's Where Am I from Pneumonium. Pneumonium, reinventing media daily.
So that's pretty fun.
Yeah. It is. Thanks. It's a lamp stack site, and one Elasticsearch doesn't work. It has not working for me yet. And once that works, I can make it with modern technology. But I was able to make it with a lamp in an afternoon.
I remember you showing me this. Like, I feel like this was like a couple of years ago.
It is actually. It is a year old.
Okay.
I think I might have had the domain name for like 18 months.
It was like an all black. It was like the background was black.
It looks like a subway
you...
sign.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's all. And I'm a huge fan of those micro websites that just tell you one thing. Like I thought, I was wondering if there's like, is it Easter.com or is it EasterToday.com? And all it says is like
yes.
no, and then it has a Google ad on the bottom. Because I saw a lot of people like coming out of churches when I was walking to Kosher Palace today.
Oh, like should I order a pizza.com?
That is just always a yes.
Just says yes. Okay.
So I know the developer who made it, and one time somebody made a joke and completely overwrote the actual website with just HTML head, close head, body, yes, close body,
that's
close
all you
HTML.
need.
My buddy Tim bought the domain name for prettylegit.com, and I don't know if there actually is anything on this website, but I know that we frequently in conversation tell people like prettylegit.com gives it like 5 hamburger buns, or we just make up a different metric every time.
I've got Quick Tangent. I say that a lot. And usually once per episode I mention that I own quicktangent.com. But speaking one last, there's nothing there yet. It just leads to other things quickly. One last bit of New York news. Move over Pizza Rat. It's time for Taco Squirrel. Have you guys heard about this?
Taco
No.
Squirrel?
This hungry squirrel is taking New York by storm, one taco at a time. New York's wild animals have become internet sensations for snatching food crumbs off the street. 2015's Pizza Rat is perhaps the best known among them. But naturally, this Twitter photo uploaded Wednesday, which you can't see over the internet. I mean, you can, but not while I'm reading this to you. Uploaded on Wednesday morning of a squirrel munching on a hard-shell taco in Brooklyn. It's going viral. The furry rodent was spotted atop a tree branch by Twitter user somebody, and people are going nuts. Move over, Pizza Rat, she captioned with the photo.
Ooh.
So it's a picture of a squirrel in a tree with a whole taco that he managed to take up, with filling that he managed to take up into the tree.
Yeah, this made it onto Mashable.
Anything.
Did it?
Yeah, I'm looking at a picture of Taco
This is from the
Squirrel
New
right
York
now.
Post, the third worst newspaper in the tri-state area.
So,
Man, that's
I guess
pretty
that
amazing.
That makes him a flying burrito squirrel.
I
there
was
you go.
searching for this, and in the process of it, I found like a picture of a pigeon with like bread wrapped around it, like it had eaten its way through the center of a piece of bread. A squirrel also trying to get into a Shake Shack milkshake. Just various squirrels and other animals trying to get into fast food.
They like it too.
Yeah, I mean their lives aren't very long either, so I guess it doesn't really affect them all that much. Like,
No, and if squirrels have a Shake Shack milkshake, they'll be blitzed on sugar.
That's a happy squirrel.
The amount of energy that they would have.
how long does a squirrel live? Is it like a couple years? It can't be.
I don't know. Why don't you ask your phone?
They hibernate, so it's
How
longer
long?
than 1 year.
They hibernate?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Huh.
I've got my money on maybe about 5 years total.
Yeah, probably 5 to 10.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Oh
I
shit!
mean, I'm sure it also depends on the type of squirrel. Google says
The common gray squirrel can live up to 12 and a half years.
the Siberian
Wow.
chipmunk
Way longer than I
lives from
thought.
6 to 10. The alpine marmot lives from 15 to 18 years.
Man, that's really surprising. I would have thought squirrels live. I think rats die in like a couple of years generally.
Well, most of them get hit by the subway.
Yeah.
Or eat something poisonous. Like, they eat an AIDS needle or something like that, and that's the end of them.
So if you had a world of rats, like squirrels would be like the Gandalfs of like the rat world that live like 6 times longer than everyone else, and just have like way more wisdom. That's how I feel about
That's funny.
rat life. and squirrel life.
Well, wasn't Gandalf immortal and the elves just live
Yeah,
longer?
I mean, I figure
Sorry,
if you
guys.
live...
I don't mean to talk that here, but...
If you live 6 times longer than the rats, I think that makes you like a wise, elder, Gandalf-y type creature. So squirrels are the Gandalfs of the rat world.
Yeah, you're like the main pig that dies in the start of Animal Farm.
Ooh.
Oh, you spoiled it, Tyler.
What? How? I didn't even know.
I mean, if you didn't read Animal Farm by now, it's been out for like 80 years. I think it's your problem if it got spoiled for you.
Depressing. It starts off so cute, then it's not cute.
It starts to feel a
Well,
whole lot
on that
like
note-
Russia after a while.
Well,
It's weird.
on that note, I think that brings us to the end of yet another episode. We've reached the 90-minute mark.
Have we?
And the... Sorry?
Have we?
Yep.
Man.
Yeah. And the joke that we always tell on this podcast is that it's an hour long. It used to be, but now it's not anymore. So...
But now it's not.
But now it's not. So next week on Polar Quest, yeah. So Ryan, it was fantastic having you. Is there anything?
Yeah, no
I mean,
worries.
we can listen. There's no time limits to podcasts. If you want, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about with startups?
With startups, I don't know. Let's see.
You're welcome to come back anytime and talk about something else. But today is a startup day.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about startup stuff at the moment.
How about you guys? The rest of yous.
Spotify is
I
the
think we're good.
most successful European startup. Anyone have any points on that?
Oh yeah, something about the increased regulatory environment in Europe does not breed as many successful startups as it does in America.
This is true.
Sounds right.
But there is a problem because we are not properly prioritizing STEM education and increases
Yes.
in infrastructure. A lot of them are moving to Canada.
We're not
And
really.
we're going to have a big problem. Also, they're building like in Silicon Valley in India and other countries that typically the idea that you have to go to America to do
I
this
mean, they're
one
a good
thing.
few years, but I mean, they're a good.
No,
several
but
years behind.
I say in 10 years. I mean, think about it. And I didn't even think about how much the industry has changed in 10 years. But it has changed quite a bit in 10 years. 10 years from now, I don't know. I think we'll have many. The idea that you have to go to America to make it big with an app or a startup is going to be yesterday's news.
I mean, I've already-
Which that yesterday is today.
I've already definitely witnessed people taking business ideas or like business models from the States and going to developing countries. Like Indonesia has a whole market based around just copying every idea we've had in the last like 5 years. Like Gojek is their version of Uber. They've got just every like food delivery service, everything. But then they even have some things we don't have because they have an actual like lower class. Like they have like Go Maid and like Go Massage where like people will like maids will come to your house like with an Uber like interface, or you can have like a masseuse come to your place. Like all that nonsense that you just wouldn't have in the States. And then like Gojek is like an Uber service, but it's done with like mopeds. So you can get like a moped taxi across the city. And it's
Can you rate them and
extremely
stuff?
cheap.
It's pretty cool.
They did that in South Park.
I think Indonesia might also smoke the most cigarettes out of any other country. But, and with that bombshell, it's time to end. So thank you all very much for coming. Ryan, do you approve of this week's pull request? Say yes.
He says
Okay.
yes.
He says yes. Christian, do you approve of this week's pull request?
Looks good to me.
Tyler?
Approved.
Well, then let's all hit merge. That is not merge. And we'll see you next week right here on Pull Request. This has been a Pneumonium production. The views and opinions expressed on Pull Request do not necessarily reflect those of Pneumonium LLC or its subsidiaries.